My friends, the Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
In the course of his teachings, Jesus said to the crowds, "Beware of the scribes, who like to go around in long robes and accept greetings in the marketplaces, seats of honor in synagogues, and places of honor at banquets. They devour the houses of widows, and as a pretext, recite lengthy prayers. They will receive a very severe condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and observed how the crowd put money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, "Amen, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the other contributions to the treasury. For they all have contributed from their surplus wealth. But she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the sunshine this morning. I think it's warming up a little bit. It's a little chilly at my house this morning. Well, the midterm elections are over. There were winners and losers. We have a divided Congress and a divided legislature in Albany, which reflects the nation's ideas concerning everything. Healthcare, Social Security, immigration, gun control. I could go on with other things, but the reality is all too real. We're a divided country, and our politics reflect our divisions. And you would think, in light of what we understand of the gospel, at least Christians could agree on things, but alas, there is no agreement. Not among Catholics. There's not even agreement within our own parish. Troubled times. Would that God might send a prophet to us, that we might be able to see the truth. There are those who believe that the age of prophets passed sometime before Jesus was born. And I know the arguments, but personally I believe there are still prophetic voices. The problem is that we don't recognize them or believe them any better than humans have ever believed the prophets. We fail to discern the truth with all of the competing voices that we have. But that's not really unusual. If you study the Old Testament, you will find that kings had prophets in their courts that did not agree. So, how do we decide what is real, what is true in a world filled with fake news? How do we decide which side to take on any of these or any other issues? I'm confused myself on many issues, so I really can't tell you what to do. But I hope you voted last Tuesday, even if you voted wrong. Because voting shows that you're concerned and that you care about the issues. Just as the ancient kings cared when they consulted their prophets. So how do we know if we voted wrong? I might answer that at the end of the homily. But first, let's move to today's gospel story. And you may see where my little previous rant actually was connected. As I pointed out the last time I preached, Jesus also lived and preached in troubled times. The Greek and Roman culture coming into Israel held out power and wealth and pleasure to those who would adopt or adapt to its teachings and its conventions. At the time of Jesus' birth, Israel and Judaism had been under this influence for a long time. And people were beginning to reject the ancient practices for a more modern and liberal lifestyle. There were some who, of course, took the opposite approach, embracing a very strict observance of the Jewish law and of piety. Now, the Romans generally tolerated religious traditions, but they offered patronage and power to those who embraced the Roman culture. This power and patronage was not available to the pious Jews, and it certainly was not available to the scribes. So, they adopted a more showy style of dress and public prayer postures as a way to reject the Roman influence. In their public embrace of tradition and the rejection of all things Greek and Roman, they were seen by many Jews as being brave, and it increased the respect that was shown to them. Now, Mark, the gospel writer, is no fan of the Romans. He viewed them as occupiers. But he held the scribes and their practices in a very similar disdain. Jesus questions the bravery of the scribes as he notes their public displays, that they don't really impress him, and they really shouldn't impress others at the time. Now, scribes were always welcomed wherever Jews met. They enjoyed their seats of honor and their public recognition. Their knowledge of the old texts allowed them to offer traditional prayers on behalf of others. And they grew rich on the associated fees. You see, the scribes didn't pray for you for free. They did incur some risk, however, but in that hostile time with the Romans, but their public displays irritated some. The benefits, however, greatly outweighed the risks because of their increased power and wealth. Are you noticing any parallels maybe to today's society? Jesus contrasted the behavior of those self-righteous scribes with that of the widow. She may have actually appreciated the scribes' apparent sacrifices. She may have been one of those whose inheritance the scribes consumed. She may have been both. The scribes' donations to the temple were another public display of their Jewish identity. And in contrast, the widow's offering, however, was a true act of faith. She gave all she had. Where the scribes, however, took care of themselves first and then gave large amounts to God from what was left over. The scribes grew rich teaching and observing the letter of the law, but they missed the message. They missed the call to a dependence upon God. The poor widow, she heard that call, and she responded. She gave her last coins, probably with a prayer, and entrusted her well-being to God as she deposited those in the temple treasury. To give God everything and to receive no human honor in return is challenging for all of us. Such radical dependence is the example that Jesus left for us. Whatever we give, our time, our resources, our skills, our attentions to others, or vote, the offering ought to be like the widow's, completely courageous and with a total trust in God's grace. So as we navigate our troubled times, let us keep in mind the warnings of Jesus. Who are the scribes today? We don't need to reject the words of the scribes, but we should reject their actions and their motivations. We need to respond as the poor widow did, with a true act of faith. We need to respond to the spirit of the law and not just the letter of the law. Now, back to my earlier comments concerning prophets and voting. Prophets do not foretell the future. They proclaim the truth. Now, we all seek to find the truth in our troubled times and our troubled world. And those of you who voted last Tuesday, I'm sure are trying to express the truth as you see it through your vote. So the question that I asked was, how do we know whether our vote was right or wrong? Did we choose the right candidate? The same way we tell a true prophet from a false prophet. Only looking through hindsight. It will be up to our children and our grandchildren to answer that question as to whether we made the correct choices last Tuesday. And as depressing as that might be, that only they will know the truth about our age, not our chronological age, but where we are living. We should, however, never stop seeking the truth or responding as the poor widow did, or the widow in our first reading this morning, who had a radical dependence upon God and God's grace. And as we try to do that, we should also try to recognize today's scribes for what they really are. And call them out.